They say a mother's love is unconditional, but what they don't tell you is that unconditional love can also be the perfect trap. For 76 years, I believed that sacrifice was the proof of love, that giving more meant loving more. I believed that if I kept giving one day, my son would finally see how much I had done for him. That one day he would say, "Mom, you don't have to worry anymore." That day never came. Instead, I watched my only child, the boy I once rocked to sleep, become a man who looked at me not as his mother, but as a bank account with wrinkles. When people meet me now, they see a woman who smiles easily. They see the calm in my eyes, the silver in my hair, and they think she must have had a peaceful life. But peace was something I had to buy, and it cost me $50,000. It didn't start with that number, of course. It started with little things. Always little things. "Mom, can you spot me for rent this month? We just need a bit of help. Mom, the car broke down again. You know how hard it is to get to work without it. Mom, we're short on the down payment. It's just a loan. We'll pay you right back." At first it felt good to help. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We rescue, we fix, we provide. He used to call me his angel. His wife, sweet as honey when she wanted something, used to send me little videos of my grandson saying, "Thank you, Grandma," and I'd cry every time because it felt like love. But I know now, that was performance love, the kind you rehearse, record, and send only when you need something in return. The first real warning came when my son asked to borrow $20,000. He said he wanted to start a business, something about importing electronics. He spoke fast, eyes bright with ambition, and for a brief moment, I saw the little boy who once promised me he'd buy me a house by the ocean. I signed the check that same afternoon. 2 months later, the business had collapsed. But when I visited them that Christmas, there was a new car in the driveway, sleek, black, shining like it had just rolled out of a dream. I told myself maybe it's a company car. I wanted to believe that so badly. When I asked, his wife just laughed and said, "Oh, we got a great lease deal." A great deal indeed. I was the deal. I kept helping. 20,000 became 30, 30 became 40. And by the time I reached 50, I wasn't even surprised anymore. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, my fingers shaking as I transferred the last bit of my savings into his account. The screen showed the words "transfer complete." And in that moment, something inside me cracked, quietly, invisibly, like a hairline fracturing glass. They didn't even say thank you that time. It's funny how silence can hurt more than words. They stopped calling unless they needed something. Birthdays came and went. Holidays became awkward video calls where they'd tell me how busy they were, how expensive everything had become, and how they were barely making it. Meanwhile, their social media told another story, pictures of wine tastings, beach resorts, spa weekends, and their smiling faces in Paris. Paris. My dream city. I'd once told my son I wanted to visit it before I turned 80. He'd laughed and said, "Mom, maybe one day I'll take you." He took someone, all right, but it wasn't me. People think financial abuse only happens to the uneducated, the naive, the ones who don't understand money. But I worked my whole life. I was a nurse for 40 years. I balanced every bill, stretched every dollar. I helped hundreds of families, raised my son on my own after his father passed. I knew how to manage money. I just didn't know how to protect my heart. And when your heart is unguarded, your wallet doesn't stand a chance. It took years of small humiliations for me to realize what was happening. The first time he missed a repayment, he said, "We're just tight this month." The 5th time he said, "Mom, you're not struggling, right? You've got your pension." The 10th time he didn't even bother explaining. That's when I started to understand he wasn't embarrassed anymore. He expected me to be the fallback, the emergency fund, the invisible foundation beneath his life of luxury. The last straw came one afternoon when I called him, not to ask for money, but just to hear his voice. He didn't pick up. His wife answered instead. "Oh, May," she said, with that tone, sweet but cold, like sugar on ice. He's busy right now. We're heading to the airport. The airport, I asked. Yeah, Bali this time. You know how exhausted he's been lately. He deserves a break. And I remember saying, a break? He's been on 3 vacations this year, she laughed softly. Oh, May, don't be jealous. You should travel too, you only live once. Then she hung up. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table again, the same table where I used to bake his birthday cakes, the same table where I once cut coupons to afford his college textbooks. The same table where, decades later, I wired him $50,000 and watched my dignity go with it. I looked around my small apartment, the cracked wallpaper, the humming refrigerator, the single light bulb above me flickering like it was tired of pretending. And for the first time in my life, I said out loud, they don't love me. They love what I can give. That was the first honest thing I'd said in years. And once you start telling yourself the truth, there's no going back. You'd think that realization, that gut-deep whisper of they don't love me, would have stopped me right there. But the truth is, even after you wake up, you don't stand up immediately. It's like being underwater for too long. You see the surface above you. You know you should swim up, but your limbs are heavy, your chest is burning, and part of you just doesn't believe the air will still be there when you reach it. So, I stayed. I stayed in the same small apartment, waiting for calls that never came. Waiting for some sign of remorse, a simple "Mom, we're sorry." But apologies, like repayments, were luxuries my son could never seem to afford. The little things became daggers, every forgotten phone call. Every birthday message sent 2 days late with a lazy "love ya," Mom, and a string of emojis that felt as empty as the words themselves. Every time I saw a package arrive at their doorstep online, tagged a gnome, blessed, hard work pays off. I wanted to comment whose hard work, but I didn't. Because mothers don't embarrass their children, even when their children have no problem embarrassing them. It was around that time I received a letter from my utility company. A bright orange notice that said, "Final warning, payment due." I'd been careful all my life, but after the $50,000 my savings were gone. I was living on my small pension and a prayer. That month I skipped buying my medication just to keep the lights on. And still, when my phone rang and I saw his name, my heart leaped. "Mom," he said, "we're in a bit of a bind. The school is raising tuition and we can't let little Noah miss out." I remember gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Sweetheart," I said quietly, "I don't have anything left." He sighed, not in pity, but in irritation. "Mom, it's always something with you. You know we're doing everything we can. Everything we can. No, everything I did." When I told him I couldn't help, the line went cold. He didn't yell, he didn't beg. He just said, "Fine," and hung up. And for 3 months, there was nothing. Not a word. That silence became my punishment, a quiet, suffocating form of emotional debt collection. I used to check my phone every hour, convincing myself maybe he was just busy. Maybe he'd call when things settled down. But things never settled down, not for him, not for me. One evening, I stumbled across a post on social media. A photo of him, his wife, and Noah, all dressed in white, standing on a beach, laughing under the caption, "Family is everything." I laughed too, but mine sounded more like a cough that wouldn't end. That night, I took out my old ledger. It was the same notebook I used to record household expenses when he was a boy. Groceries, school uniforms, doctor visits. The pages were yellowed, but my handwriting was still neat. For the first time, I decided to write his debts. Not out of spite, out of clarity. The bill of a mother's love. That's what I titled the page. $3,200. The rent I covered the first year after he got married. $4,500, the temporary car payment when their SUV was repossessed. $2,000, the emergency trip when their dog needed surgery. $20,000, the business investment. $7,800, tuition help for their son's preschool, $5,000. Credit card balance I paid off to save his credit, $2,500. The new couch they couldn't afford, $5,000. Just until next month, $50,000. Total. I underlined that number twice, and below it in smaller letters I wrote, and the interest was my peace of mind. I stared at the list until my eyes blurred. $50,000. That was my lifetime of savings. The money I'd planned to use to travel, to finally see Paris, to maybe buy that small cottage near the lake. Gone. But the real loss wasn't the money. It was the realization that every dollar I gave was a piece of dignity I'd never asked to be repaid. The next morning I tried calling again. He didn't pick up, so I left a message. "Hi, honey. I was just wondering if you got my card last week. I sent you a little something for Noah's birthday." A lie. I hadn't sent anything. I couldn't. My hands trembled as I hung up, and then for reasons I still don't fully understand, I whispered to myself, he'll come back when he needs more. And he did. A few weeks later, another call came, this time from his wife. She sounded cheerful, almost too cheerful. "Oh, May, how are you, dear? Listen, we've been meaning to ask, would you be open to co-signing a small loan for us? Nothing big, just a formality." A formality. That's what she called it. I laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was the dry, brittle sound of a woman who's finally out of tears. "No," I said. For a moment, the silence on the line felt like thunder. Then she said softly, "I see." Her voice lost its sweetness. "Well, that's a shame. We thought family helps family." And then she hung up. That phrase, "family helps family," stayed with me. It used to mean warmth, trust, togetherness. Now it sounded like an invoice. I realized that to them, family wasn't about love. It was about access. The calls stopped altogether after that. The silence grew longer, heavier, but strangely, it began to feel like peace. I started spending mornings sitting on my porch sipping tea, listening to birds instead of excuses. There was still a dull ache in my chest, but it wasn't sorrow anymore. It was detox. The slow withdrawal from years of emotional addiction. One afternoon I got a letter, not from my son but from the IRS. Apparently, he'd listed me as a financial guarantor on something. I felt a familiar chill crawl up my spine. For a moment, the old me wanted to fix it, to call him, to plead for explanation. But then I remembered that list, the ledger. The 50,000. I folded the letter neatly, placed it in a drawer, and whispered, "Not this time." I was still poor then, financially at least. But for the first time in years, I felt a different kind of wealth building inside me. It wasn't money, it was clarity. The kind of clarity that doesn't come cheap. The day everything broke wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no slammed doors, no thunderstorm rumbling in the distance. Just a quiet Tuesday morning in early spring. One of those days when the air smells like renewal, but you're too tired to notice. I just finished my breakfast, oatmeal, half a banana, black coffee, when the phone rang. For a heartbeat, my heart leapt the way it used to, stupidly hopeful. Maybe he was calling to check on me. Maybe things were turning around, but it wasn't him. It was the bank. "Mrs. Larkin," the voice said, polite but detached. "We're calling to confirm a transaction. Someone attempted to withdraw $10,000 from your account this morning." I felt my fork slip from my fingers and clatter against the plate. "Withdraw," I repeated. "That's impossible. I haven't touched that account in months." "Yes," the woman continued. "It appears the attempt was made online, using a shared authorization profile." Shared authorization, the words didn't register at first. Then I remembered. Years ago, when I helped my son refinance his car, he'd needed temporary access to my online banking. I'd never thought to revoke it. My voice went cold. You're telling me my son tried to take my last savings? The woman hesitated. Ma'am, we can't disclose that information without. I didn't need her to finish. I already knew. When the call ended, I sat perfectly still for a long time. The room felt heavier, smaller. Even the clock on the wall seemed to tick with a kind of pity. That was it. That was the moment everything I'd been refusing to believe finally solidified into truth. He wasn't confused. He wasn't lost. He wasn't just making bad choices. He was using me deliberately, systematically. And I, the woman who taught him to write his first thank you note, who stayed up sewing costumes for his school plays, who skipped meals to make sure he had enough, had become nothing more than a wallet with a pulse. I remember standing up slowly, like an old tree finally realizing its roots had been rotting for years. My knees ached, my back hurt, but my mind felt sharper than it had in decades. I walked to my dresser and opened the bottom drawer, the one with all the things I'd been keeping, just in case. Old birthday cards, a few photos, and that ledger. I flipped to the last page, the one with the total written in my neat, looping handwriting, $50,000, and under it I wrote one final entry. Attempted withdrawal, $10,000, emotional overdraft denied. That S, when I felt it, a strange kind of laughter bubbling up from deep inside me. It wasn't hysterical, it was liberated, like the sound of a lock finally clicking open after years of rust. I sat down, exhaled, and said out loud, "He doesn't own me anymore." And for the first time I believed it. That evening I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a real dinner. Not the usual soup or sandwich, an actual meal. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. I even lit a candle at the table, just for me. I remember thinking, this is what peace tastes like. After dinner, I took a walk through my neighborhood, slow, steady steps under the soft orange streetlights. Every porch I passed seemed to hum with life, laughter, music, warmth. And yet, for once I didn't feel jealous or lonely. I just felt awake. When I returned home, I sat by the window and opened my laptop. There were dozens of unread messages, bills, newsletters, spam. But one notification caught my eye. A social media post from my son. A photo of him and his wife clinking champagne glasses at what looked like an expensive resort. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. Couldn't he have done it without family support?" I stared at that line for a long, long time. And then something inside me shifted. Not anger, not sorrow, just clarity. The kind that burns clean. I took a deep breath, hovered over the unfriend button, and clicked it. Then I blocked his number. Then his wife, S, and just like that, silence. Not the kind that punishes, the kind that heals. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No nightmares. No what? Ifs, just rest, deep, unbroken rest. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was pouring through the curtains. I brewed my coffee, sat down, and started to write. Not a list this time, but a plan. At the top of the page, I wrote 3 words, my new life. Sell the house, move somewhere quiet, maybe the coast, start painting again. Join a senior social club. Stop apologizing for existing. As I wrote, I realized I wasn't just planning a move. I was drafting my rebirth. A few days later, I called my old friend Clara, the one I'd lost touch with because I was too busy helping the kids. She picked up on the second ring, her voice full of that same gentle humor I'd missed. "May, my goodness, are you still alive?" she laughed. I smiled, barely, but I think I am finally ready to start living again. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, and for the first time in years I didn't glance at the clock. When we hung up, I realized something profound. Forgiveness doesn't mean trusting again. It means releasing the grip their betrayal has on your soul. I wasn't forgiving for them. I was forgiving for me. That night, I stood on my porch again, looking up at the stars. They were so bright, so distant, so unbothered by the noise of human greed and guilt, and I whispered into the dark, "God, thank you for showing me the truth, even if it broke me first." When I finally moved into my new place, a small cottage near the ocean, I didn't bring much. A few photo frames, my mother's old Bible, and the teapot I used to pour for my son when he still called me Mommy. The air smelled like salt and jasmine. The silence wasn't empty, it was peaceful. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up wondering if someone needed something from me. I didn't have to check my phone to see another mom. Can you just message? I sat on the porch one morning, tea in hand, and realized I was free. Not just from their financial chains, but from the invisible leash of guilt they wrapped around my heart. Forgiveness didn't come easy. It wasn't a magical moment where I suddenly stopped feeling hurt. It was a daily choice, to release the bitterness so it wouldn't poison me. I forgave them, but I also drew a line they could never cross again. When my son finally called months later, his voice was soft, almost cautious. He said, "Mom, we've been thinking of visiting." I smiled, not in anger but in understanding, and I said gently, "I wish you both well, but I am at peace now. Let's keep it that way." There was silence on the other end, the kind that holds both regret and respect. People think freedom means running away. But for me, it meant staying still, and finally not being afraid to say no. Now my mornings are filled with birdsong instead of arguments. I bake bread, I tend my garden, and every evening I whisper a prayer of gratitude. I lost $50,000, but I gained something far greater. My dignity, my peace, and my soul. And sometimes when I watch the sunset paint the sea gold, I hear a quiet voice inside me say, "You did the right thing," because forgiveness is to weakness. It's choosing to heal, even when the wound was carved by someone you once called family. I forgave them, but I will never let them hurt me again, and in that silence I found God and myself.